The twin suns of Zarathus hung low over the capital spires, casting long shadows across the crystalline courtyards. Where I walked silently behind her Grace Virelian prime daughter of the High Accord, keeper of the Nine Systems. And my charge, for as long as my blood still pumped through this mortal body, the mission brief had said light security, no credible threats, minimal resistance, but I had learned never to trust the silence of alien politics, and that intuition clawed at my gut as we crossed into the Hall of Accord, where every pillar whispered history and every sculpture seemed to judge me for being human in a place that had known only the shape of Zarathi knees and clawed feet. My fingers hovered near my sidearm, though I kept my expression neutral for her sake. She walked with the poise of someone who had never known fear, not because she had never felt it, but because she had grown used to denying it. As we neared the days, a flicker in the air caught my eye, and that was all it took. A blur of motion, a hiss of light, and then the plasma bolt was screaming toward her heart. My body moved before I thought, before I breathed, before I even remembered I was mortal. The bolt tore through me. With the sound of ripping silence, my knees gave out, and I collapsed at her feet, leaving a splash of red that soaked into the transparent floor and stained the sacred crystal with something ancient and human and not welcome here. Screams echoed through the chamber, summoned fear, others in outrage, but all I saw was her face. The mask cracked, her eyes wide with something that looked too much like grief. I tried to speak, but blood filled my mouth like oil, and she knelt beside me despite the scandal, despite the protocol that forbade a prime from touching a lower species, despite everything. Her hands were warm against my face, and her voice trembled with a word I had never heard from her lips before. My name, she said, my name, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded, like it was something sacred, like it was hers. They carried me away in silence, wrapped in white fabric that burned with antiseptic light and synthetic hope. The medics spoke in clicks and blinks, ignoring the human blood on their gloves. The prime was ushered into a sterile chamber, locked behind glass like a relic they could not understand, nor allowed to fracture the illusion of diplomacy. But she fought, she screamed without sound, because protocol muted those in her caste, and I knew even from a floor away that she had broken something inside herself. When she watched me fall, I woke in a bed that hummed softly beneath me, and for a moment I thought I was back on Earth, but then the gravity reminded me that this world was heavier, and so was everything else, including my chest, which ached not from the wound alone, but from the weight of her last look at me. The door hissed open, and I turned my head slowly, expecting another medic, but it was her in a cloak that hid her rank, with her face bare and raw and beautiful in ways the galaxy had not yet learned to define. She stood beside my bed with eyes that no longer hid behind diplomacy. She reached out slowly, as if testing the rules, and found none left worth obeying. Her hand touched mine, and in that moment the entire galaxy could have spun off axis, and neither of us would have noticed. She asked if I hated her for what happened, if I resented the bullet that was meant for her, if I blamed her for the blood I had spilled on her soil, and I told her no. With a breath that barely held together, I told her I would do it again, and again and again, because I had sworn to protect her, not just by duty, but by choice. And she looked at me with something that belonged to neither politics nor survival, but something far more dangerous. She leaned down slowly and pressed her forehead to mine, the gesture of highest affection on her world, and I felt something in me shatter and reform, like bone healed wrong, but stronger than before. The assassin had vanished, of course, and whispers spiraled through the council halls, accusing this faction and that rival, but all eyes eventually turned to the prime herself, because she had knelt, she had cried, she had touched the human they called my bodyguard like it was a sin, and a vow. At once I was discharged quietly with honors they did not mean, and medals that jingled like shame around my neck, but I stayed on the planet in a quarter far from the palace, yet close enough that she could find me, and she did every night, cloaked in shadows and silence. Her presence a rebellion against everything she had been taught. We spoke in hushed tones about peace, about change, about what might come if the galaxy ever learned that a human bled for an alien, and she bled back in love. I taught her Earth phrases like love hurts, and she Taught me that some things are worth the consequences even when the cost is everything you have ever known. They tried to separate us, of course, with distance, with duty, with threats masked in etiquette, but it was too late. Because something had taken root the moment she had said my name, with that crack in her voice, something neither law nor bloodlines could erase. She stood before her people one final time, with her voice strong and steady as she declared the bond between us not as scandal, but as evolution, not as defiance, but as truth. She gave up titles that meant nothing to her anymore, and stepped into the uncertain storm of a galaxy that does not forgive easy love. And I walked beside her, not as her protector anymore, but as her partner, her equal, her wound and her healing. And the stars above Zerethus watched without judgment as we crossed the crystalline fields where once my blood had fallen. And she took my hand without fear, without shame, daring the future to do its worst, because she had already chosen her side, and it was mine.